Go.
Okay.
So, hey, thanks for being here. I'm Steve. I'm one of the co-owners of Scuppernong Books in Greensboro, and I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction for everyone, and then we'll talk for a little while, and then we will open things up for questions or comments. This is a very casual kind of thing, so if you have a burning thing that you need to say in response to what one of us says, then please feel free to kind of jump in. If your question will wait till the end, then we'll
Hi,
take
my
care of it
babies.
then. Hello. And then you can also put questions in the chat or comments in the chat as you think about them and get them off your plate, and then we'll deal with those as we go along. Everybody is muted. Everything is good. All right. So like I said, I'm Steve. I am the co-owner of Scuppernong Books in Greensboro, and the editor at Scuppernong Editions. I'm the author of a novel and a short story collection, as well as lots of essays and other things involving words. And just so you know, there are ducks on our screen, my screen. Scuppernong Editions is a small press based in Greensboro, specializing in hybrid memoir, books about the now in North Carolina, which we're just getting ready to publish, and reprints of classics with contemporary commentary. Our newest book is launching tomorrow, and it's called Inside Voices from Death Row. It's essays written by 4 men on death row in North Carolina, with a foreword by Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote Dead Man Walking, and a afterword by Phoebe Zerwick, who wrote Beyond Innocence about the Daryl Hunt case. So that's, you can always go to scuppernongeditions.com and see what we do. Stephanie's book was published through Scuppernong Editions, as was Laurie's previous book, Everything is Personal, Notes on Now. So we've been trying to actually bring Stephanie and Laurie together for at least a year and a half. And because of the various, because of the world, just because of the world, it hasn't happened. So let me tell you a little bit about Laurie and Stephanie, and then we'll move forward. Laurie Stone was a longtime writer for The Village Voice, a theater critic for The Nation, and a critic at large on Fresh Air. She won the Nona Balakian Prize in Excellence in Criticism from the National Book Critics Circle, and 2 grants from the New York Foundation for the Arts. She's published numerous stories in publications such as N+1, Waxwing, Tin House, Evergreen Review, and more. Her new book is streaming now, Postcards from the Thing That Is Happening Now, that is happening, I'm sorry, too many nows, from Daughter Press. And Scuppernong Editions published her previous book, Everything is Personal, Notes on Now. Stephanie Grant's first novel, The Passion of Alice, was nominated for Britain's Orange Prize for Women Writers and the Lambda Award for Best Lesbian Fiction. Her second novel, Map of Ireland, was a contemporary retelling of Huck Finn that places female sexuality and friendship at the center of a foundational American myth about race. It was nominated for the Lambda Award for Best Lesbian Fiction. Grant has received fellowships and awards by the National Endowment for the Arts, the Rona Jaffe Foundation, the Ludwig Vogelstein Foundation, and the Ohio Arts Council, among others. She currently directs the MFA program in creative writing at American University, and Scuppernong Editions published her Disgust, a memoir, last year. So we're going to talk for a little while and go on from there. And welcome, just welcome to everybody who's here. Events in the time of COVID, because none of us are agreeing that it's actually over, are weird and it's always difficult to know how many people will come. So it's great to have all of you here. And I want to start, I'm sorry. Yes, Stephanie.
I was going to jump in with a question for Laurie, but
Please.
am I deterring you from the path
No,
that you were?
I will not be deterred. I will
You'll
say
not be deterred.
Yes.
So,
go ahead.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. It's lovely to have you in such an intimate space, right? It's funny how Zoom can be both alienating and very intimate at the same time. And Laurie, it's wonderful to meet you. And it's been really fun reading your work. And I loved it, especially the very last section of the book, in part because you were tracking your intimate relationships with women, and some intellectual relationships with women as well. And in the section about your friendship with Anne, you write, in talking about your own writing, you say, I try to follow 3 directives when I write. Don't apologize, don't translate yourself, and don't ask for love. And I just thought that was wonderful, but I'd love to hear you talk more about those directives and how you realize them.
Sure. Steve, are you good with this?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I like the fact that you just jumped in. That's great. I will tell you, and then I will ask you what attracted you to the question itself. I wrote about stand-up comedy for a long time, and I have a book about it called Laughing in the Dark. And in order to be a solo performer on a stage, the most important thing is for the audience not to be concerned that you're going to need anything from them. And I developed this kind of rubric really for myself as a narrator, or my narrators as narrators. It is not always me, but some version of somebody talking about something to the reader. So also not to need anything from the reader, in a sense. So for me, they're really all about don't ask for love, in a way. Don't translate yourself by trying to get them. Like talk to them as if you think you'll speak a language that then you will attract them back to you. Apologize in the sense, not that you might make a mistake and say you're sorry. I don't mean it in that sense. I mean it in the sense of defend a position, or like apologia, in the old-fashioned sense of an apology. So, but the crucial thing is they're really all versions of don't ask for love. And what I'm saying is basically don't ask the reader to stop feeling what they're feeling, to pay attention to you narrator, or you author, perhaps. So I'm always trying to check through a narrative and say, did anything leak out? Did I ask the reader to love my friends, hate my enemies, come on my side, think like me, as opposed to give them a world to enter? And the less the narrator needs anything specific from the reader, the more you can seduce them into thinking the story's about them. And to me, that's the whole trick of narrative, that the reader thinks nothing has come in between. They don't want to be bothered by your need. I also don't think there's any such thing as an intrinsically interesting or uninteresting story, that the story is not about what happened, it's about what the narrator makes of what happened. And so these narrators that I invent, along the way, I'm trying for them. Their only reliability is basically that they're similar in this particular way that you've really brilliantly and beautifully focused on. So let me throw it back to you. First of all, did that make sense to you? And secondly, what made you ask the question?
I think it's interesting. My initial response to your response would be to push back that in fact we do ask things of the reader all the time. And part of what we're asking of the reader is engagement, right? That whatever we're writing, it doesn't land until it lands. It doesn't
I know, but it's a
until the
trick.
reader receives it, right?
I think it's a trick of narrative. I think it's all smoke and mirrors and technique.
Mhm.
And so in order to get the reader to think that, you haven't tricked them into listening to you, there are things that you employ. That's the way I work.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I yeah, I think it's actually a beautiful conception of narrative and engagement. You're
I
describing.
I don't really want to tell the reader anything that the reader doesn't, I don't have knowledge to impart. I don't have meaning to convey. I want to excite them. I want to give them pleasure. But there are all kinds of ways people experience pleasure, sometimes through, basically the pleasure that I offer is contradiction that can't be resolved. And so basically then we're in the realm of comedy. For me, I think of myself as a comic writer because I'm interested in limits and the things we can't get to. But that's a lot of abstraction right there, for the beginning of a of a conversation about writing. But so push back and then I'll shut up and you talk.
No. I mean, I've pushed back fine. And I mean, you are actually a provocative writer who tells us what you think all the time, right? And makes pronouncements all the time as part of your persona on the page.
Yeah.
But maybe you're not asking. I mean, in a way that's just actually kind of thrilling to read, especially from women writers who are willing to sort of take up that kind of space and make those pronouncements and make all those calls.
But it's comedy. I mean, these are monologues. I'm talking. I think what I do is thought in action. Really, I mean, there are characters who there are characters in action. They have predicaments. They have sometimes like in the story about the friend that goes wrong. There are scenes. There are memories that are fully fleshed out. The people are somewhere concrete. They smell things. They taste things. They see things. They hear things. But the rumination that the narrator is having for the sake of the reader between these moments is thought in action. She's not really, she hasn't chewed the whole thing up and presented it as a finding. You're seeing somebody trying to think something through in the process of telling you the story. And so it's a trick. That's one of the tricks of it's like a soliloquy. It's like a Shakespearean soliloquy. The character is, you're watching the character think the thing through as if it's happening in the moment. But in reality, that is also what happens to me as a writer. I don't ever write. There's no pre-writing. I don't have any ideas about what I'm going to say. It's always happens. It's very much an activity for me, writing. It's action. And so that thought in action, which is practiced, of course, to layer, narrative, but I don't know ahead of time. It's very exciting to me. Like I sat down today to write about seeing the beginning of Pierrot Le Fou last night, which I fell asleep not that long after it started. And I just didn't have no idea what I was going to write. And then suddenly, I began to find things to say. That pleasure is very rich to me. And it's never, of course things get developed later, but that sit down and see what happens thing is very much where the work comes from, for me anyway.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think I emailed you in conversation is there are ways where you're very present and there are ways where you're very concealed, and we come to know you as a narrator, as the writer of the nonfiction book, right? We come to know you through your observations, through your through the cultural commentary. And that you emerge sort of over time, right? And in the ways that books ask questions and then answer them. I was really struck by how late some of the answers came. Like, why did she get married at 19? Oh
yeah. I don't know.
her father said he'd co-sign the lease if she.
But it can't just be that. It's never just
indeed
answer, right? Yeah.
But true enough, but the text itself is giving us some of those questions, and they're really answered over time. And I think I'm sort of the inverse, which is I I speak so much about myself and reveal so much upfront, and I feel like I work by implication for the sort of larger political questions and the social questions. And you're just engaged with social question, cultural commentary, moment to moment to moment to moment. And really in the way of a traditional essayist, in the way of Montaigne, really, you emerge over the life of the book in these little ways that we get to glimpse you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's beautiful and lovely, and I'm glad that that was your experience with the book. I think with anything I write, I want people to fall in love with the voice of the narrator, not with the person who's obviously you can't,
Right.
because I reveal so many despicable things that I think and do. So, I can't really ask you to love her. That's good. That's probably the reason why, don't ask for love. It's not going to happen. But I could seduce people and charm them with humor, I think. Let's leave me aside though and talk about you. Steve, what kinds of questions did you have for Stephanie? Or
Well, it came up when you were talking a minute ago, this idea of versions of ourselves that that writers bring to what they write. And I wish that I'd like for each of you to just talk about that, coming to a version of yourself from which to write. And I'm not necessarily saying that that is a set thing that is there. You decide to write, and for the next 25 years, you have this version of yourself that you write from. I wonder about approaching separate pieces, and I wonder about finding the version of yourself from which to begin when you're writing memoir or memoir-ish, which is what we're kind of calling it.
right.
So I wonder about how
Well,
you.
Stephanie should say that, I think,
Sure.
first, because I've been chatting a bit. Yeah.
That's fine. We came to hear you chat. That that just really happens for me at the sentence level, and that voice and what that voice is going to be for a particular text, or an essay, or a book, or even a novel, happens. It accrues over time, and for me, really lately, especially, it's just so much about paying attention sentence by sentence to what I'm saying, to the syntax of the sentence and the way that meaning is revealed, and the voice emerges sort of through the accumulation of all those choices. I mean, at some point I start to see what's accumulating. I start to see what's there.
Do you have a certain idea of sentences, a kind of sentence that you love versus
I think it's just really changed over my writing life. And that, my first novel, the sentences are very spare. They're very pared back. A lot of simple sentence constructions. And over time as a writer, I've gotten more and more interested in elaboration and sort of self-interruption, and really seeing sentences in an architectural kind of way. And I'm really interested in the ways that they hold feeling. And emotion, and the ways that architecture can support that and contain that. And
That's
so
great. I thought that your book, for me, in its most Laurie-like way, was a list. When I really liked it. Now, not a Joe Brainerd list, but not that, maybe a Edouard Levé list. He doesn't elaborate the way you do for your little paragraphs as much as you do in them, but there is a kind of sense I felt in this book that definitely developed, gained power, of this mind ruminating over all the different ways she could think of what disgust is, and the different ways disgust had influenced her life, or she had felt it. And Richard and I were talking about the word itself today when we were walking in Hudson. We have a new little morning thing, or today it had to be afternoon because it poured. But we take this walk, and we have a walk talk, and we talked about the word disgust, and how rich that concept is for you. And it isn't something I even think about, as a concept. I mean, there are other things perhaps, that I would recoil, in some sense. But anyway, never mind what I think about disgust. What's interesting to me about, one of the things that's interesting is that the relentlessness of this, let me come back to this. Let me turn it this way. I'm going to come back to it this way. And I'm going to tell you this kind of way that I think of it, this abstract way, but here's my experience with it. And here's another experience with it. Here's yet another experience with it. And I really, really admire the kind of concentration and stick-to-itiveness of that. And also, it's a great prompt in a sense, even for a short piece, don't leave the thing, like the jumping around of focus and attention. Come back, like even if you're going to go away, come back to it again, come back to it again, come back to it again. I think is very strong. And I like the listy aspect of, or I'm calling the listy aspect of the book, because it doesn't really have a narrative or plotty kind of, teleology to it. You're not going anywhere. You didn't come from anywhere. So I have this other little thing that people who've worked with me know, like, that I have this other rubric, which I try to actually use in all my stories, but I think your book is a good example of it. Start in the middle, fail to arrive, remember to love something, make the reader hot, make the reader laugh. So those 5 things, hit those 5 things. So no teleology.
Can you say that again?
Yes, I can. Start in the middle, fail to arrive, no teleology, and no, bows and, right. and contradiction that can't be resolved remains, resonant and vibrating. So start in the middle, fail to arrive. It's a little bit like the Chekhov idea, write a story and then cut the beginning and the end off, and that's your story. Okay, start in the middle, fail to arrive. Remember to love something. This is really important to me, to remind myself, to be happy and love, let the narrator be in love with something on the page. Make the reader hot, because you have to. Excitation doesn't have to be sex itself, but it has to be arousing in some, the language or the text or the subject matter or the way that you surprise them. I hope that you saw that a lot of my work is very much at the sentence level too, which is where we're quite similar, but where I'm also asking the reader to rethink something by the time you get to the sentence, at the end of the sentence, that the sentence itself could be a baby story with a surprise at the end. But in any case, there's excitation in that very kind of sentence, which is going to, like, what? I better read that again. I don't quite know what you mean. I do it on purpose, in that sense. I try to write sentences that will create that sense of excitation. And then, of course, comedy, because I'm always trying to seduce everybody all the time and keep them there in the room. And comedy is great as a way to seduce people, make them laugh. Basically, who doesn't want to laugh?
I think comedy is so hard. I think I am only funny by sort of by happenstance, and that the humor in my books tends to be very dark. I have a third novel that didn't sell, and it was a comedy. And I think I could not grip the right amount of distance that the comedy requires.
We should have our own private conversation another time about comedy, because you certainly could be. Comedy is so interesting as a form, and it can be practiced and produced. I do believe that of all of these techniques that I'm talking about, or that I think I practice, they all can be practiced. They can all be broken down, in a text, and then, made models of or examples of, so that you can practice them. Richard, did you want to ask about that word, about the disgust word, or to come in at this moment with anything and your thoughts?
I don't think I'm allowed to.
Okay.
If you guys.
Steve, back to you.
Actually, I will.
Okay.
I don't want to step on my own thought, but while I've got it, is the thing that I think you have most in common as I step back from reading your latest book and Stephanie's, is the phrase that keeps coming back to me is this a notion of fear of contamination, and how significant it is for both of you. And I think my understanding, this is my quick view. For Stephanie, there's a connection between disgust and fear of the notion of fear of contamination that runs through everything that's in this book. And so that's a sort of key concept. We go to the Mary Douglas sort of understanding. For Laurie, fear of contamination doesn't lead to disgust. It leads to it's a key to misogyny. It seems
it's only
culturally and
political,
socially.
actually.
Yes, it's political in it.
Yeah.
And I think this thing that you share, which is this fear of contamination approach, departs in the degree to which Laurie is not being psychological, but being political. But of course, you both are being both psychological and political. It's just how it appears. So I think
I'm not so sure I'm psychological. I think Stephanie is. I think I'm personal, but I don't know that. I think that the feeling that you might have from reading me, that you know me psychologically, is because of the smoke and mirrors, of the tricks of what I'm showing you.
So
And that is candor, I would say. There's a certain kind of blunt candor that my narrators will just say something about themselves, like in that story you mentioned about the friend, where I do a really bad thing and I talk to the reader about it.
I keep being bothered by smoke and mirrors as being too trickster, right?
I am a trickster. It's all tricks.
So this seems to me the big question of the collection. When I ask myself, how are you doing with this project of accepting yourself as a person who harms and irritates other people? My answer is, I'm getting nowhere. And I mean, that's a dodge, because you actually are getting somewhere. And it's
Really?
precisely, yeah, I think so. And it's precisely that revelation that that you know yourself to be this way is what engages the reader, right? It's that willingness to put that frailty on display and be direct about it, and be, it is what invites the reader in. I don't think it's a trick.
But that's where comedy, it is a trick, because that's where comedy lies. Comedy is always about failure. And it really is, if you think about it. And it's about limits. Tragedy is about transcendence. Comedy is about limits. The sense I can't, and so, what you're offering the reader in a moment like that is the reader's sense of where they themselves are stuck. And that's where they connect, as opposed to a real revelation. It's not a real revelation. There's nothing real in the book, really. I think it's all fiction, but I understand Steve's, of course it's based on stuff that's happened to me, but I mix fiction and nonfiction and memoir, and criticism and social commentary completely randomly, like lasagna. Maybe it's spaghetti, or, things are intertwined more. But I don't mean to frustrate you, Stephanie. I just, because you're saying this is what I felt when I read you. And I'm saying this is how I made you feel it. But you want it to be a real thing that you felt, that you actually discovered something true and real about me. I don't know. I mean, it's not my job to know what you felt. It's my job to make you feel anything. That's what I think the job of the writer is, to stir strong feeling. But I do think it's technical.
You will never get Laurie to admit that what she writes has a very strong connection to herself.
No, that's not true, Steve. I don't mean to dodge that. I just mean that because I'm so language based, and language produces the effects that you're talking about, as opposed to a map or other kinds of data that could be presented to people that they're engaging with. That's why it's all, to me, in a sense, fiction or technique. Language is making you feel things. Language is
Yes.
not a thing, it's metaphysics, right? Yeah.
But feeling towards what end?
Oh, just for the experience of being a human being who feels things and then dies. That's it. I don't have a real model of how
Mhm.
we're supposed to live.
Mhm.
Thank the baby Jesus. Yeah. I mean, that's a joke for Jews. Anyway. I'm sorry. I hope I haven't offended any Christians or, shutting up now. Steve. Yeah.
All right, let's go in a different direction.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephanie, I'm interested in because you'd written novels previously, what changed? What drew you toward memoir?
Um,
Or what compelled you,
Mhm.
or whatever
Yeah.
the verb is.
Sadly, life changed, I think. I think to a large extent, Disgust is a book that I wrote because it was the only book that I could write at the time.
That's a great answer. It's
Yeah,
a great
it is.
answer. Yeah.
And the sort of metaphoric demands of fiction, which is to say that it's all a metaphor. The whole construction is a metaphor for something else. Felt impossible given the demands of my life. I have to say that I have struggled. What does I think David, I heard David Shields at a conference, and I think he was quoting Philip Lope, talk about the groaning contrivance of fiction.
Mhm.
And it was one of those phrases that was like a stake in the heart. I was writing fiction, and it made the groaning contrivance of fiction so evident. And at different points in my writing life, I mean, I think so many people felt this, say, after various crises, after 9/11, that it felt a little obscene to be imagining a present other than the one that we were in, because it demanded our attention so acutely. And so I've struggled with fiction, and
That
I'm
seems like a good reason to write it then, because obscenity, never mind. You know what I mean? It's like a
Yeah.
good dare, if
Mhm.
it's obscene not to write it, then certainly one should write it at that very moment,
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I understand that it wasn't possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how does that, and part of what we talked about very briefly when we were talking about doing this was the last couple of years, both politically, both with the pandemic and everything that is happening now, and how that does affect the way you approach what you write. Does it change it at all? Does it
It's such a good
change the
question.
focus?
Yeah. Who do you want to answer?
Laura, you answer that one.
I think for me, it's less the pandemic than the reality of Trumpism and certain events in, I would say, the history of feminism and the women's movement as it's moving through time and space and cultures, have affected me, and also aging. Those things have come together at the same time that I'm learning to write better sentences. So what will those better sentences be at the service of? I don't really think they're at the service of anything. So, in a sense, I don't have any grand things to tell people, but I am feeding myself more and more understanding of myself in the world and the world. And so I'm writing through that understanding better and better sentences. I can go faster and funnier and quicker to wherever I'm going. So that's happened to me as a development. It's just, so a combination of history, time, and an aesthetic, kind of decision making about what can I do and how can I do it better? Those decisions.
Mhm.
Maybe it is the case that because you've written this book in chunks, and I always write in chunks, or at least lately I write in chunks. This collage idea, this this tiles, what mosaic sort of way of building work, fits the level of awareness that people are able to grapple with, and as well as the technologies that we're all engaging with, the social media and and our phone life. This sense of the phone as a kind of extended mind. I like that, actually, but it is changing us in some sense. So maybe what your form has taken and what my form has taken is especially available in the moment. So by accident, some kind of combination of forces have produced a desire in both of us to write a certain way that happens by chance to be more available to our readers because they don't have the time to do something else, or they like it, or they can do it on their phone, or they're writing on their phone anyway. And somehow it mirrors maybe more the technology, but I don't know. I also think if we're not coming to, I hate the idea when people say to each other on social media, oh, that's not the thing. That's the distraction from the thing. I think there's no such thing as the thing, that there's no such thing as distraction, and there's no such thing as the thing. So because of that, it's anything that I can bring my full self to. I'm going to bring my full self to those, 45 minutes of that Pierrot Le Fou. I'm just going to bring my full self to it. Where am I? I'm going to think about what happened last night. Bring my full self to that. I'm going to bring my full self to a terrible, mistake I made in a very important friendship that destroyed it. And I'm going to really the same amount of focus. But it also could be to
well, it's also
to a
present.
shitty movie. It's
focused.
always it is present,
Focused,
and
it's present.
and it's also all I can do, to be the writer. I like writing. Do you like writing?
Oh, very much. More
Yeah,
than
but not everybody
anything
who
in the
writes
world.
likes it. Yeah, I really like it. I always thought it was erotic, spending time alone in your head with language. What an incredibly fun thing to do. And mainly I'm just saying to the world, leave me alone, go away, please, I'm thinking, and the life that I've lived, which allowed me to this extraordinary indulgence of being able to say that out loud or to myself, feels so, I don't like the word privilege, but I will use it now, pretend it's in quotation marks. But in that sense, I feel incredibly privileged to have been able to live with my thoughts. And that made me a better writer. So I don't know. I mean, I know, Steve, you want to go back to the pandemic, and I don't know if I'd be writing differently. I doubt it. I doubt it. I actually doubt it. I just think I've arrived at this place where this is how I write.
Yeah.
And then other people arrived at the place of saying, oh, this is what I want to read. Well, isn't that convenient, for me and you.
Yeah.
But maybe they don't want to read long novels anymore. I think they like streaming media is brilliant, some of it. And when it's really good, it's fucking brilliant. Yeah.
Stephanie,
Anyway.
do you have?
I don't think I have anything particularly to add. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I'm teaching an essay writing course at the university where I work, and I'm just aware of the essays that I've chosen for the students to read are all modular, are all grades or mosaics, or almost all of them, and I'm just aware that that our minds are increasingly interested in those braids and mosaics and numbered sections and contain those kinds of containers.
It gives the reader the job of making meaning, therefore. So you're giving them basically the technique of montage. You're saying, I'm going to put this image here, and then I'm going to put this one next to it. And meaning is
that's what you're asking them.
Well, in effect, but also because of the jump cut eliminates all the crap that no one really wants to
Yeah,
read,
absolutely.
and it makes you go much more quickly. And I'm always interested in I mean, if I know a lot of the people here are writers and artists in other genre, but
Did you read any of the Hilary, I think it's Hilary Mantel novels, The Wolf Hall and the Anne Boleyn, all of those?
no, I didn't. I
I
know
felt
probably
like
should've.
she had begun to do that with in those books, where she just cut out the stuff that didn't
That's
matter.
great. Yeah.
I have to, I mean, I have to go back to them, but that was my impression of one of the reasons they were such a sort of shocking form of the historical novel, because she had just, you know, didn't knit the places in between things. She only gave us.
But your book is exactly like that. You just, you know, the reader is thinking what's between, you know, there's all this space, literally, you know, with the blank page. But in that blank page, we think, what you're going to say next, and it's wonderful. You know, it's really alive in that sense. I loved the way you structured the book. You know, very much so.
Yeah.
Steve, what do you think we should do with our time? Should we open it up to people's questions and thoughts?
Why don't we have a little bit of time and we can go past 8 if that's okay with everyone. Why don't you and Stephanie, you want to read? Just a short.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that
That's good.
I would like folks to get a taste of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to read part 2, which is Some Things That Disgust Me, and it's 3 little chunks, so it's pretty quick. 2.1, genus Rattus, order Rodentia, which is to say rats generally, specifically a rat in my house, not small, more medium-sized, skulking along the baseboard, brazen, plain as day, that hunched comportment, as if tensing its shoulders, readying itself, the long, pink, pointed nose and too long tail. One night, impossibly a possum under the dining room table, backlit, the same menacing silhouette and long, pink, animate tail. How did that freaking thing, all its furless parts, nose, ears, the little busy paws, more intensely pink, what you might call, if you were Joyce Carol Oates, sexual organ pink, writing about women and men, writing about purity and danger. How did that freaking thing enter our house, our lives? 2.2. Disgust is matter out of place, says anthropologist Mary Douglas, in the wrong place. Dirt not necessarily dirty when outside. Also the reverse, inside things suddenly out, suddenly on display, like entrails, say, or tissue and bone. That time the college basketball player's leg broke on national TV, the bone piercing the skin, his teammates, coaches, cameras, all turned away, shaking, shook, doubled over in disgust at the body envelope of Kevin Ware, broken open, exposed to the dirty, dirty air. Possums are marsupials, but like rodents, make their bodies follow wherever they push their heads. 2.3. If our bodies are envelopes housing us, our persons, the skin is the body envelope's envelope. My daughter, with a tiny screwdriver, takes apart brightly colored plastic pencil sharpeners to liberate the tiny razors trapped inside. She shaves her skin in parallel lines, peeling away her self-disgust one layer at a time. At night, unable to sleep, I wonder what possum out of place, what inside out, what outside in, what genus Rattus has provoked her disgust. Unable to sleep, unable to read more Joyce Carol Oates, I sit hunched at the dining room table, tensing my shoulders, readying myself, my long pink animate tail, my little busy paws, waiting for her disgust to metamorphose like mine into rage.
It's great.
Thanks.
Very
Thank
strong.
you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Okay, Lori, you got
All
something?
right. Yep, I got some stuff. I have to put my phone light on though. I hope I don't blind anyone. I can't really see. Let's see, I've got 3 little sections too, I think. Yeah, maybe 4 little sections, but okay. The man I live with says he will dig out the trash in the ravine. He doesn't want the man who helps us to get ticks. The man who helps us has a gentle smile, poor eyesight, and a ZZ top beard that floats as he strides along. The man I live with tells the man who helps us to find something he feels like doing instead. And the man who helps us trims the lower branches of the spruces that look like dirty petticoats around the legs of the trees. I say to the man I live with, well, you'll get ticks. He says, I'll use the stuff that keeps them off. The stuff that keeps them off is on the floor of the mudroom. We can't keep up with the ways we need to be careful here. I say, I'll help you dig out the trash, and we climb over mossy rocks into the ravine, and it's like entering a museum. Trees that have grown through twisted barbed wire have keeled over, their roots exposed like the limbs of accident victims tossed into a common grave. We dig up rusted sardine cans, cobalt blue bottles of milk of magnesia, the lids of pots, the soles of shoes, all the innards of a life no one was supposed to go looking for. It's evening, and trees are stretching to the sky. I remember a Shiba Inu who was standing by the entrance to my building. He looked up, and I placed my hand on the furrow between his eyes and slowly moved to his ears, then across his long neck and tapered waist and down to his curled tail. I dreamed I cut off my front tooth and thought I could glue it back with saliva. I could not glue it back with saliva. I remember a man I gave a mug to, as well as a silk shirt and a copy of Baudelaire. After I gave him the shirt, he became better at sex. After he left me, I saw him at a memorial service and wondered if he still had the shirt. He was wearing a suit the color of a peach that was riding up his arms and legs. He looked beautiful, except for the tight suit. If all of life were up to me, I would make one reckless decision after the next and learn nothing. A couple more. Oh, I think this is the, yeah. An old friend suggested I would be happier if I made the most annoying person in my life into my teacher. That was her word. She said I could learn patience, compassion, and a way to drain anger from my life. I felt like I was in a supermarket and my cart was being filled with things I don't eat. Finding instruction in irritation is like faking an orgasm. Then it struck me, I might be the most annoying person in my friend's life. And immediately I felt compassion for her for sticking it out with me all these years. Okay, and this is the last one. Yesterday on Facebook, I wrote about The Undoing and mentioned that Nicole Kidman couldn't tighten her lips in an emotional response because they were already tight from plastic surgery. People jumped on Kidman for having cosmetic surgery. They jumped on cosmetic procedures in general. And I thought, oh shit, I've encouraged these people. Today, I want to tell you how much I love cosmetic procedures. I am 104 years old and as agile as a baby lamb because, so bad to laugh at you. Okay, I am as agile as a baby lamb because cosmetic procedures have given me the will to live. I have not had fillers or Botox in what now must be going on a year. If COVID doesn't kill me, Zoom will. The man I live with looks good and has done nothing technological to enhance his body and face, unless you count pulling up 4,000 tree stumps, which I do count. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
You're welcome.
All right, we're
So
going to
that's-
open it for questions now, but before we do, I want to say that I have posted links to buy Lori and Stephanie's books in the chat, and both Daughter Press and Scuppernong is giving you free shipping. Woo!
Yay.
If you order from us. So if you're interested, the links are right there in the chat. And I was supposed to tell you one more thing. What was it? Oh, we're also recording this. So if you, is that a surprise to you, Stephanie?
No, but might be a surprise to them.
Well, you're not on the screen. You're just little things up there. So if you have somebody you want to see it, it'll be posted at the Scuppernong Editions, on the Scuppernong Editions website within the next couple of days.
Great.
Okay, those are the two businessy things. Questions, comments, things you want to say?
Please. Oh my goodness. Nobody.
I have a question for Steve, actually.
Who's
Hi.
speaking?
Hey,
Oh, Shin-san, hi.
So, hey, what made you want to get these two to converse, aside from the fact that you've published them? I mean, I see, some parallels, but just do you have a more specific?
yeah, partly it's just that I think they're cool people, and I think cool people should talk to each other. It was less, it's not that I saw, grand foundational things in their writing that would bring them together. But I think that they, Stephanie and Lori, approach writing in different ways and approach life in different ways, probably. And I think that is just a good thing it's good to bring people like that together and just kind of see what happens. And I'm making it sound more like an experiment than it really was. But we scheduled this for a year and a half, well, 8 months ago at a festival here in Greensboro. So it was actually going to be a live event. And then we've been kind of trying to do it since then. But they're both just really cool, interesting folks. And I like the way they think, and I like the way that they talk about things. And I'm always interested to hear them do it more.
Yeah.
Shin-san, did you have what's your thought about what you were listening to? If you want to share it.
I'm always fascinated, to listen to interesting, smart people. Your writing, I'm very familiar with. Stephanie, I'm not. So this is, but just even the title alone, Disgust, a memoir, is incredibly compelling.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
bravo to you. Yeah. And it's interesting. The whole thing about whether it's a pandemic or Trumpism or what have you, but it definitely feels like the world is noisier, So I think that it has made it, for different reasons, I'm sure for lots of writers, just, how do you respond to that noise or not,
Well, how do you think you are in your practice at the moment, responding to that?
Yeah, I mean,
sense of-
I think in the very I feel like in the very beginning, there was a deep sense of shock, in terms of the pandemic. I mean, I think that the Trumpism aspect is more of an exhausting effect for me, but I definitely could not write for like a month, I think, when the pandemic first happened. But now it's sort of like, I feel like writing is the one thing that kind of keeps me sane, just to stay in my own world.
I think
Very
everyone should unmute and talk to each other,
Yeah.
just freely, like pretend it's like a writing workshop, because right now it could be. And just, if you don't mind, if you feel like
Yeah.
just
Can you hear,
sharing.
can you hear
Yeah,
me?
question.
Yes, Dee Dee, please jump
Oh,
in.
yeah. I am so inspired by everything you said today. Both of you are such excellent writers, and I'm also a musician and a painter. So I got a lot of inspiration. You mentioned the word peach. And then because I remember writing a song how I was eating a peach and it was peeling down and the juice came down to my elbow, and I used that as an emotion inside one of the poems of my book, Life of a Kalamata. And then you both mentioned tail, which I'm thinking, is it Tail or Tale? So I was thinking of Edward Gorey. I have no idea why he came into the picture, but I'm so inspired by both of you, and I just cannot wait to buy your books. And
Great.
and I also wanted to mention my lovely friend, Dorothy Friedman August. She actually knows you. She's a writer as well. And she studied under John Ashbery. But I mentioned you to her, and she was like so excited about it. So we're going to be putting the show together. Do you ever come into New York City, if I may ask you?
Talking- You mean Lori? I'm talking to Lori?
Yes.
To me? Yeah.
come to New York
Yeah,
City?
I do, but right now just for gigs, because
Okay, great.
it's so expensive to go for us, and also we don't. Yeah, we have to. It's a schlep.
It is
But
okay.
we do,
And
yeah.
even for Stephanie, like I said, you're both, because there's a lot of special reading going on, and I would love to introduce you to. There's a whole big world here in the East Village, and I
I've heard of that.
Oh yeah. Well, I help one of the poets run. I assist her, and I get a lot of people there within the community. So I would love to have you both as a feature. It'd be fantastic.
Let's keep it. Well, I know you and I will keep in touch, so we'll
Oh,
definitely
yes,
talk
yes.
about it. Yeah.
Oh, but I'm so inspired with everything you both have read today. I'm so excited. I have my bass in the other room. I play in a band as well, and I also paint. I want to show you one of my paintings.
It's hard to see, Dee Dee. Oh, but I can see a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Wonderful.
I'm so inspired. So when I get off with you, I'm gonna pick up my bass and just do something.
Fantastic. I
Yes.
think
Thanks, Dee Dee.
if a conversation produces art, I mean, what could be better?
Oh, it does. Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Jelana has a question, if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yes. Hi, Jelana.
Hi. Yes, you pronounced my name right.
Yes, thank you.
No, thank you. That's unusual. I have a question for Lori and Stephanie. How do you think the pandemic has affected the attention span of the average reader in your audience, not necessarily the average reader who might be reading a beach novel or something? I mean, do you think that your writing itself has evolved with the pandemic to a certain rhythm and a certain length?
It's a great question. I like the idea of the rhythm part of it, especially. But Stephanie, do you want to jump in and respond first?
I mean, my sad answer is I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing that has happened. I started a Substack, and some of you know because I hound you about it every fucking 5 seconds. But it's so interesting because to me, because maybe I have more access to actual real readers on a direct basis than I ever had before. How would I know how people are reading me? You don't know. Think about all the years I wrote for publications like The Voice and all these other places. How do I know what anyone's thinking, or wrote books before these more recent books? You don't know. So, because all of these things happened, before there was this immediate form of electronic instant communication where you can get an author like immediately, you can just tell them like, I like that, or I didn't like it, or why. So it's extremely interesting to me. And I find myself trying to think about how to gauge what I'm doing in relationship to what I think they want. Now, this may seem weird because I'm going to say something. Now, what they want, what do they want? Like, so I'm trying to think, what do they want? What do they want? I'm trying to judge this by Facebook. And now I'm on Instagram, which is a whole new crop of humans that it's very exciting to know because they would never go on Facebook before. So now I can grab them. And then this, the Substack thing. What I can tell you, everyone, is that when I try to figure out what people want from me, they're always right. So it's not like I'm at any risk of catering to anyone except as an actual caterer. But as a writer, no, I'm always going to I only have this one voice. It's only going to talk to the reader as it can. But when they're saying, oh, too much crap, too much negativity, Laurie, it's boring. Or I can see that's what they're saying because they like this one more than they like this one, or they'll share it, or they'll tell their friends to read it. They're always right. They're reading at length, or I mean, in numbers, the best pieces. And so I'm telling myself, pay attention to what they think the best pieces are, because they're probably right. And that means it's making me a better writer to pay more attention. It's making me think harder about what do people want from writing. And so it's not to me it's not so much attention span. I think people are giving me a lot of attention, and probably always have. I once early in the online dating thing, like I corresponded with this guy and for a little bit, must have like done emails. And then I told him my name at some point early on, and he wrote back and he said, "Oh, Laurie Stone, I always thought your writing was overrated in the Village Voice." He thought he was being flirtatious. Oh, come on. You've never heard of that. It was great. It was absolutely great because he thought that but I thought, I didn't even know that my writing was rated, much less overrated. But the reason I'm mentioning this now is because I don't know what the reason was, but it hit in my thoughts somehow. These things were related. It's about, I guess, never mind that guy, but in terms of the feedback I'm getting from readers in the other media, they're saying, oh, I know what it was. It was the idea of too much attention. I think I am getting, quite a bit of attention, as anyone who writes a lot on social media gets it. You just simply do. But I find it super useful, and I've never had the ability to sort of sift it and think about what are they responding to, and trying to apply that knowledge to the writing itself, which doesn't mean it changes what I write. It may change what I would post. Like what does the reader want next? Like on Substack, because I'm really writing a book on Substack. That's not a book, right? It's a Substack, but I'm not doing a newsletter. I'm just posting literary pieces and making a work out of that in this other, platform. The attention span, I don't know. I think it seems to me, since I like writing short anyway, and I like writing in this verse, I may be just the right kind of person for short attention span people. I mean, just by the fluke of it. And anyway, a lot of people here have read me, so you can tell. You can say, yeah, your short stuff is better than your long stuff, or you give up. I give up after a certain amount of time. I'm thinking about, I have some really long pieces that I want to publish in serial form on the Substack and see what happens. Will they keep reading them? I don't know. I find it really interesting to experiment with all this. Is that useful to you though, Jelana? I mean, in terms of what your question was, that answer.
Yes.
What about your reading habits in the pandemic? How have they changed?
I've read less and less of anything of length.
Okay.
Part of it is that the pandemic spurred my severe alcoholism. I'm
Oh.
absolutely serious. So
I understand.
I
Yeah.
can't actually read anything more than a few pages at a time. So
Oh, got it.
I do, I
Okay.
mean, but I enjoyed your writing before that, for what it's worth.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. That's great. And I know you read me because I see you. And I'm so happy when I see your reaction.
Thank you. And also you guest taught a class at City College that I sat in. I didn't sit in on, I paid for.
Brandon? Is it Brandon? Brandon Judell.
I think it was Lynn, maybe? Was it Lynn? I don't know. It was some
Okay.
teacher.
Oh,
at City
I
College.
know. It could have been Valadares, you know,
Yes.
the poet. Yes.
Yes.
Michelle
Yes.
Valadares. Oh, she's
Yes.
fantastic. Yeah.
I remember.
Um,
Anyway, that's where I first.
Oh, that's
Here you go.
wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's
Yeah.
see if
I have a
anyone else-
question.
Yes.
I have a question
Yes.
about memoir.
Yes.
How do you see memoir in terms of chunks of paragraphs, words, emotions, etc.,
Yeah.
being strung together so that they actually simulate a traditional novel?
Do you
know,
think,
in other
are you
words,
working in a form like that yourself?
I am.
Okay. Well, how's it working for you?
It's working. I've always written in chunks,
Yeah.
but probably like most people, you know, I'm here and there, and so I'm inspired to write something here and there.
Right.
But I always have this overriding sense that it all must dovetail into the story I'm telling.
Don't
So
do it. Don't do
I
it. But,
don't
yeah,
do it?
Trust the reader. If it's really, I think Stephanie's book really does exemplify in a sense that idea of deal it out. It's their cards, you know, deal it out. Let the reader do the reader can't do all the work, obviously, but you have to trust more that your powerful moment next to another calm moment, it's more like music. Think of it more like music, you know, where you would have to pace something. And, you know, and that's what I was saying about the Substack. I can't give them 5 flash fictions in a row. They'll say, what the hell? You know, I paid all that. I paid $5 for, you know, for a couple of words now. So, you know, so you have to sort of deal out like a long, okay, maybe I should put like a, you know, kind of a memoirish thing. But anyway, back to your book. Trust that if each piece is getting, make each one a baby story. Make each one have to deliver. Don't let it go. Go back and rework it until it delivers as a piece in and of itself. And the accumulation of pieces that deliver in and of themselves, if the themes are close enough together, the reader will do the work of feeling they have read a novel. Trust me, or don't, but you know, I mean, because when people say that, it's ridiculous. But that's my advice. That's what I would do. I think that's what I do in my work.
Yeah, the
I
reader
will
wants,
do it.
the reader wants to do that work.
The reader,
Otherwise, the reader feels disregarded and condescended to.
fed. They feel like you're being,
Interesting.
you know, yes, you have to trust the reader's desire. Also, Homo sapien brain is going to make a story out of anything you put in a series. It's just simply going to do it. That is the whole, you know, problem of our brains. They're metaphysical. They're going to make meaning where it's just stuff that's happened, right? Yeah. So, but that works for narrative. You know, the metaphysical properties of Homo sapien brain are good for narrative, not so good for the rest of, you know, existence, but in narrative, useful. Do you understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I've written my chunks, so to speak, as perhaps, you know, anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 words. And I think each of them could stand alone, but at the
Mhm.
same time, they could be blended to
Oh,
create
maybe,
that long
yes.
narrative.
Well, there is a whole thing that I like to work with in, which is the braided narratives. Like you take two stories and you intercut them. You wrote them as two separate stories. Try seeing what would happen if you break each one down into 5 chunks and then smaller pieces, and then you just alternate them, like switch, like driving on a road in the Mediterranean, where the road switchbacks, all in all. You just, that's definitely something to try to see what will happen. I think I'm willing to make all of these experiments with text that mainly poets do, but I'm a prose writer and not a poet. I don't know anything about the end line. I'm looking straight in the eyes of a very good poet right here named Reagan. So, but I'm willing to make all those experiments with language and with what I originally intended, I originally intended that, fuck it, throw it up and see what will happen. What will happen with the pieces themselves as they start to talk to each other that you have no idea about. And that's the unconscious mind that's going to come into play. Does that help you, free it up a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm
Great.
coming from a place where I worked in Hollywood for about 20 years.
Mhm.
And then I also taught screenwriting at UCLA and Cal State Long Beach for about 20 years. So I sort of, my specialty was construction, which is studios would actually hire me to come in and reconstruct a screenplay so that it built and ended at the right place and so on.
Right.
So I'm actually now trying to break myself out of my own cell, so to speak,
Right.
and
Right.
become more free,
Mm.
because I lived in that box for so long.
Yes, I'm sure that there are wonderful pleasures from the box too, that you will always be able to, I wish I knew more about the box myself. I don't know enough about the pleasures of the box you just described, but I think finding pleasure in another way of working, you won't lose the pleasure of the thing you've already got, which is very practiced and very, very, very available to you. But this free, wanting to be freer somehow and discovering what the unconscious might come up with in that, what would happen if this, these two stories start to, be braided together in conversation with each other. You
Mhm.
simply can't know until you try it. It may be,
Thank you.
crap, but you're welcome. You're welcome. But
Honestly,
that's how my
I feel
stuff-
like I just had an epiphany moment thanks to you, where I feel free.
That's
Thank you.
great. Great. Maybe
All
you'll
right,
come to
folks.
the, yeah.
That
Thank-
seems like a great place to
To go out.
stop.
Okay, wonderful.
We're ending on an epiphany here. Well, how can you do better than
Tiffany
that?
is good. It can't
Yeah.
be better. Oh my gosh, it's got to be 17 minutes after. Thanks everyone for
Thank
such
you.
wonderful
Thank you so much.
Thank
attention.
you, Lori, and thank you,
Brilliant.
Stephanie,
I
for
loved talking to you, Stephanie. I'm so happy our paths have crossed, and I
Me
hope
too.
we will continue.
Me
You're
too. I hope
so
so very
interesting.
much. Yeah, no. Thank you,
Yeah.
Steve.
Looking
Thank you
forward.
so
Thank you,
much.
Steve, for putting us
so
together.
much.
This was really, really good.
Thank
Beautiful.
Thank